we almost knew what we were up against. Like we
Immediately.
were like, unless there was a miracle, we were going to lose our child.
Welcome to the Recovery Vow Podcast. I'm your host, Eric Kennedy. Today's episode is brought to you by Newsom Electric, New Spring Church, Augusta Lawn and Turf, and a special thank you to all of our other supporters of the Recovery Vow Podcast. Today on the Recovery Vow Podcast, I've got some very close friends. I've got Wes and Kelly Hennings, and I just want to say thank you guys so much for coming by and hanging out with me on the podcast today.
Yeah, thanks for having us.
And not that you have a story in drug or alcohol or substance addiction, but you have a story of recovery and a vow that you've made to each other through loss. Mm-hmm. And I know this is going to be a heavy subject, but I just feel like listeners need to hear how strong married couples make it through seasons, especially when it deals with children and the loss of a child. So I want to hear your story as we get toward hearing Graham's story. But Wes, Kelly, walk us through how you met, or better yet, how you were set up.
Well, I'll let Kelly get into that, but I think it is kind of odd when you first asked us. I thought, we're not in recovery. I know what your podcast is about. And I'm like, this is not a recovery story like you would expect. Yeah. But the more I thought about it, the more I thought, no, this is like, we have spent a long season of recovery. And the little that I know about AA and recovery programs is that it's something that you live with for the rest of your life. And I think that a trauma, particularly like this, is something that you deal with every day after it happens. And you have to wake up every day and say, this is part of who I am, but I have to keep going with my life.
When you say wake up every day, do you feel like, is that the first thing you think about? Or is that kind of changed over time?
It's not the first thing I think about, but I see little points through every day where it impacts the person that I have become and the decisions that I make or what I think about in response to things that have happened. So I feel like it does just become a part of who you are.
Yeah. How about you, Kelly?
Yeah,
as a mom,
I agree. I think in the beginning, it definitely was like first thing you think about every morning. But then,
for sure,
less frequent, less intense kind of thing, but still always there. And yeah, different points. And like, there's never a full day that goes by where you don't think about it. So yeah, I would agree with Wes's thing.
So if we back it up though, years, I don't know how many years, but if we back it up, tell me how you guys met. How did y'all start dating?
You tell the story, because you'll tell it differently than me, I'm sure.
Why? Because did she chase you or you chase her?
That's a good question. I don't know.
It probably flipped.
Okay, back it up. So,
there's the loaded point I wanted to get to.
So I was attending the church, and I was friends with Sarah Love, who, her dad is Marty, the senior pastor. And, we had been hanging out. We were all in our single season of life. I don't know how much we would basically.
No, you can tell as much as you want. This is, it's Recovery Vow Unloaded.
Okay. So some things were going on in Sarah's life, and Wes was a little snippy to her, and she was complaining to Marty about it. And Marty said, Wes just needs a woman. Like, he's just going to be snippy until he has a woman. You're just going to have to
then
let
the snippiness probably changes.
Yeah. And
no
then they, because I do think, obviously I didn't know Wes before me, but I do feel like you were a lot more intense with some of the church stuff, and a lot more, because it was like the main thing. I don't know. I've heard that from volunteers back in the day. But anyway, so Sarah was like, I think I have the woman. So Marty texted Wes and texted me separately and was like, hey, this is a word from Marty. Disclaimer, this is not a word from the Lord. But I like Wes is a good guy. Exactly. So I was like, okay, whatever. I knew who Wes was. I really didn't even know he worked for the church. Like, I thought he was just like a high volunteer, possibly. Like, I didn't really know anything. And so we were doing a kids choir thing, and I was like leading the choir. And so a couple days after Marty sent that text, and so we were having to like work together with
Okay.
stuff like that. You can tell the leaves. I know you're ready. You're ready to tell that.
Yeah, he leaned forward and just shared a little bit.
I'm just trying to decide what parts of the story I'm correcting or not. No, that was pretty good. So children's musicals were not my favorite thing to do.
Yeah.
At the time. So I was
But
already,
musicals are your passion. Like you're in that world.
I do love a good musical,
Yeah.
but I generally prefer the people to be a little above the age of 4. So they needed some leaves on the screen, and so I was like,
It was taking place.
What
The
kind do
setting.
you want?
The setting was a park. The time was fall.
So
That
I'm
was it.
trying to discover if they have particular leaves they want, because these people that run these musicals can have certain needs.
Yeah.
And so Kelly, this girl who I'm told I need to date, but I've never interacted with, just yells up at me from the stage.
No, we're both on the stage. We're both
Were
standing
we?
on the stage, and you were like huffing around, like, "Oh, I gotta do all this stuff."
And she just says to me,
Have y'all been text or I guess
we had
No.
not texted each other.
So this
is
was
our
gonna be your first interaction.
Yes.
And she just says, "How hard can it be? Google search fall leaves." And I'm like, "Whoa."
what you doing later?
It was in a jokey banter, I think, but okay, whatever.
She misread the room in that situation.
Maybe it wasn't because I had 60 kids
Yeah.
screaming too. So
And
I
then
don't
we
know.
proceeded to go on a coffee date. That was a little weird. And then we went to Carrabba's, and that was a disaster.
Well, who
she
asked who
literally-
out after the leaf thing?
You
Yeah, I did. No, I asked her to go on
Facebook messaged me, I believe.
Yeah.
Oh, that's your
Because we both had this similar likes of enjoying One Republic music. So
Oh, I don't remember that part, but okay.
we had both liked that band. So
I think that's when you
brought that
liked
up.
things that you liked on Facebook. Like it showed like your
Oh, yeah.
interests.
That's before the moms got
back in
on
the
Facebook.
day. Yeah.
So asked her out to coffee, said, "Hey, yeah, let's try this again." It ended up being Thanksgiving week. On the way to the date, apparently her mom had blown up her Thanksgiving plans. And so that's all we talked about for an hour or so over minestrone soup and
I don't think that's accurate,
chicken
but okay.
marsala.
This is
But also, I do think I was not really trying that much because I feel like there was too much pressure because everybody knew that like Marty had kind of set us up and everybody was checking in all the time. I was like, I don't know. Like, I don't know him. Like, I don't, anyway. So I think that was really what
year was this?
tipped it over.
2011.
2011.
End of 2011.
So the church was a lot smaller, and
Yes.
the grapevine, we call it. I mean, everybody's going to know what you're doing.
Yes. Mhm.
Exactly. And then, so I was like, okay, this didn't work out. Clearly it was just Marty and not the Lord that did this. And then on New Year's Eve, I got a text from her after I was already in bed. And she was like,
This was from Thanksgiving to New Year's. So I don't think we've talked in that span.
and she was just like, what are you doing for the New Year's or something? And I totally clueless, don't know, I can't pick up any signals. So I'm just like,
I think it was
I'm asleep.
I was like, Happy New Year. And you were like, Happy
I'm
New
in
Year.
bed.
Yeah. I was like, what did you do? And you were like,
So are you
Let me
considering
see.
yourself talking or just friends? Because I get so lost in that.
I don't even know if
I
we
get
were
lost
anything.
in. If you
I
go out
would
on a
say-
date to Carrabba's, are you talking? Or
I think
are
we
you
just
dating?
went on a date and then we like,
I think we thought that was a one and done.
yeah,
Oh, okay.
I would say.
But
Yeah.
then with less pressure in 2012, it kind of sparked and took off.
Mm-hmm.
And I think so we went from, not talking at Christmas, a text on New Year's Eve, and then we were married by the next New Year's Eve. The next New Year's Eve, we were on our honeymoon.
Yep.
That's amazing.
Mm-hmm. Yep. So once it took off, there you go. So
So, okay. What was it like dating? Did you learn a lot about each other that you feel like, of course, you found this attraction and you had a lot of things in common, but when did you know that she was your person and that he was your person in that dating season? Especially if you come from shouting at each other about leaves on a stage and then
yeah.
no Thanksgiving, no Santa, but Happy New Year, baby.
at the urging of one of our mutual friends, Eric, didn't respond to her text. Like I let her do the chasing there for a little while at the beginning of the year.
You responded. You didn't start any.
Right.
You didn't start the text.
I would respond to a text, but I would never text her in.
Like
be the first person.
And let me say, this was very early on in texting, like relationships as well. Yeah. Like texting in 2011
I'm trying to think,
was
when did
like,
the smartphone come out? Was it out then?
That was my first iPhone. I had just bought it because I just got my first like real job.
Yeah.
So
because I had the phone where you had to press like the letter or the number a couple of times to get to different letters.
Barely. Yeah.
Yeah. We moved on from texting code and beepers, but I was with the flip phone.
Exactly. So the rules I'm sure are very different now. I don't know. It was Thank
God we're not out there.
It was different.
And so once I really got to know her and we had real conversations and it wasn't, with the backdrop of the holidays and all that stuff, I think I realized pretty quickly that this could be the person for me.
That's awesome.
And I think looking back, I don't know, this may be controversial. I don't know that I believe in this romantic notion of just you click and that's the person you're supposed to be with. I think that you choose to love somebody. And when I saw that we were compatible and that we, had similar interests, similar faiths, and that this is a person that I could spend my life with, I think that we spent that next season choosing to love. Like I spent that season choosing to love her. Yeah. And it's been the best choice I've made.
Yeah.
I think I remember, we lived in the same town, but across town. And so I remember like we'd be hanging out, at one of our houses or like hanging out at my house, and he would like go home for the night. And even if like I knew I was going to see him the next morning because of whatever, I was like so sad, and I had never really felt like that before. I was like, I don't really want you to like leave. You know what I'm like?
But
I think that's
married,
when I was
so you can't stay here.
He did leave, but I think that was when I was like, oh, okay. Like I've never really like felt like that before.
Well, that's love.
So
yeah, you
Let
guys are
that be
falling in
clear
love.
to our pastor who might be listening. I did go home every day.
Public service announcement. Marty Patty.
Can I throw this in just for free? That chastity was also a choice that we made prior to our marriage. And that is something that had been ingrained in me from my dad. That choosing not to have sex before marriage is a decision that can benefit you in your life. And he said that he and my mother had made that decision. And I remember clearly one night we were taking a walk in my hometown when I was home from college or something. And he said, I believe that decision that your mother and I made is a direct correlation to the blessings that you have seen in your life.
Okay.
And so I said, I want to pass that blessing from my dad to my children. So, I know it's not in vogue to wait until marriage to have intimate relationships, but I do believe that it can be a beneficial decision.
This is where your story and a different kind of recovery plays a part. That's a generational teaching that he's giving you. Not every parent does that, from drinking in front of their kids or saying, hey, you need to be abstinent from sex because of this reason and finding the blessing in the marriage. So I totally get it. I totally get it. But it kind of sped the relationship up because you guys were married pretty quick.
Right. Yeah, I was 30 years old and it was time.
Yeah, I was like, let's say we were not 19. Yes, I was 25. He was 30. Yeah. We dated for 6 months and we were engaged for 5.
Yep. Let's get it going.
Yeah.
Yep. Let's get to the honeymoon.
We were going to be engaged for a longer time than that, but after I
had to meet his parents. Okay. I'm not getting engaged to somebody before I meet their parents. Like,
I
cannot sign on to this. And they at the time lived in Arkansas. And so I was like, either they got to come here. They are not traveling people. I was like, so I've got to go there and like, make sure this is like, okay. And, anyway, so after that,
so it was like summer. Right. It was like summer, and I thought, we'll get married next spring, next summer. And so we get back from that trip to meet my parents, and she's like, have we considered a December wedding? And I'm like, heck yeah, I've considered a December wedding.
Yeah, no, he was like, okay, yeah, that's fine. Just tell me when.
If you can pull it off, you say the day, and I'll get a tux.
What was the date in December?
Ooh.
The 28th of December. And we laugh about that because, skipping ahead in the story, we've adopted 2 daughters.
Yeah.
And in front of the judge, I said the wrong date for our wedding. So I perjured myself in Aiken County. By saying the wrong.
He didn't lock you up though. So it's okay.
It's okay.
He didn't really care, I don't think. He was like,
he was
check.
just wanting to sign a paper.
Okay. Dated, fell in love, got married. How soon after you tied the knot, made everything official, did you guys know that you wanted to start having babies?
Well, we had talked about it before. We knew we wanted to. We had also talked about, we knew we wanted to adopt at some point.
I didn't know that. So that was a part of, that was a part of you want to have kids and
yes. I am one of the, I don't know that I want to see like studies on this, but I, as like a child, wanted to adopt, and I like some of my baby dolls were adopted, like, so I don't know what, like, again, Kelly. I've heard other people say this, like, but I don't know, like, some of my friends were adopted, but like as a kid that didn't really, like, we didn't talk about it all the time or anything, so I mean, like, I knew what it was, but anyway, so I knew when we were dating that I was like, hey, like, this is like a thing that, you know, I'm like pretty passionate about, and he was on board. So
we both have a social justice bent to our personality. And so I think we thought, if we're going to talk the talk about loving and caring for marginalized or children that have been in these situations, then we have to actually do something about it as well. Was
the plan to have your own child first and then adopt, or do you think you would have adopted? Did that matter?
I mean, if something had like fallen in our laps, probably we would have. I don't think it was like, oh no, we have to like have a biological child first. But that was kind of the plan, I guess, that we were just, you know, dream scenario kind of thing. So, but we got married at the end of 2012. And then we got pregnant like the middle of 2014. About a year and a half.
So you waited a couple of years, enjoyed some time together.
Yes.
Yeah, and I suggest that for any married couple.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Yes.
My wife and I, she got a package deal, but I was a little, well, I'm a good bit older than her. Depends on when she was in her 20s, I was in my 30s. So that's a big difference.
That's what we were,
yeah. But, you know, I
was 30, not in my 30s.
see where it makes a difference in the age, you know? So, yeah, I mean, I get it. But you decided to have your first baby. And let's talk about Graham. I remember when Graham was born. I remember Graham coming to work. I remember so much. And so I know this may be a little heavy, but just walk us through what it was like to become parents and then the diagnosis.
The first 6 months were relatively normal, nothing majorly popping up. He had missed the milestone of rolling over, but the doctor was like, like give him a little time.
When does that happen?
I think they said 3 to 4 months. Okay. But I think we were a little closer to 3 months, and he was like, just give him some time, you know. So then at our 6-month checkup, we had some concerns because like, he's not rolling over. I feel like he is kind of regressing a little bit. He's very chill. Like, you know, a lot of 6 months olds are grabbing at things and like all over the place. He wasn't really doing that. And
I like to say, before that 6-month appointment, we were the white picket fence family. Like, Graham was an easy baby. He started sleeping through the night at like 12 weeks or something like that.
Blessed.
Yes. Yeah. Hashtag blessed. And it was going so well. We had, right before we got Graham, we had just bought a brand new home in a great neighborhood, and it was just smooth sailing. It was just, you know,
saved yourself for marriage.
You know, it was who's that? Norman Rockwell. It was a Norman Rockwell painting.
He was the first grandchild on both sides, so everybody's, you know, going crazy
so excited.
over him.
Right.
Yes.
And we'd had family members that had passed that I think that you expect to pass, but I don't think we'd ever had like
a tragedy,
a real tragedy in our lives. And now everything is just, you know.
Have you guys ever faced any kind of trauma in your childhood or 20s before you got to this moment?
No. My dad is an alcoholic, so like from that, but in comparison to this, it was very different,
Yeah.
just a different
Yeah.
experience.
Yeah. I mean, because what you're about to talk about is just something that's traumatic for sure.
Yeah.
To where you could have chosen to dive into things that addicts would have dove into.
So I'll let you talk about that appointment. I kind of interrupted you there.
No, you're good. The doctor came in and looked at him and was like, you got to go to the hospital like right now. Like this is not good. And we were both there, right? You were there too.
Did they tell you in that setting like what they think could be going on?
At that time they just said pneumonia, which he had pneumonia. We found out later that it was from losing his swallow. That can happen. And so we went to the hospital for pneumonia, and that's when they kind of like started all the testing. And then Wes that night went home to go like get clothes and stuff. And so it was just me and Graham, and Dr. Allen, the pediatrician from that morning, walked in the door of the hospital. And I was like, that's weird. So he came in, and that's when he said SMA. He was like, they don't know, but this is on the short list, and like just gave a brief like over. He was like, I just wanted you to hear that from not a stranger.
That's sweet.
Yes.
Is that the first time you heard those letters?
Yes. And so I was like, I'm not going to Google this. And I mean, later, eventually we did, but anyway, that's kind of when like all the onslaught of like appointments and stuff started.
It's amazing how much 3 letters will change your life.
What's the SMA stand for?
It stands for spinal muscular atrophy, which is ALS, and Lou Gehrig's disease is a much more common disease. And it essentially is like that in babies. So you essentially just lose all your muscle tone to where you're not going to be able to breathe. And you won't be able to survive. So at that point, it was the type of SMA that Graham had was almost always fatal before the age of 2.
Okay.
So that's what we would find out. That's what they would confirm for us the next day.
Oh, what would happen from testing? You would know the next day?
So you have to officially get a genetic test, which takes a few weeks, but they can rule out all the other things with tests. So they were like pretty positive. They didn't know all the type and all of that stuff, but they can know enough to, give a diagnosis or whatever.
Yeah.
And I think at that point is where we get to something that's important for the audience that's listening to this podcast, is that at that point, we almost knew what we were up against. Like we
immediately,
were like, unless there was a miracle, we were going to lose our child.
Did he tell you that, or you just?
The neurologist, the lady that like gave the official like diagnosis, I don't remember exactly the words, but basically.
Yeah.
It's very interesting because we were at a teaching hospital, so there's all kinds of students and, training doctors. And so they would come in happy, all this. They would give Graham a checkup, and they would kind of get stone-faced and leave the room without telling us anything. And then what happened after that is that we started to see an influx of students because it was a really rare condition. And so, of course, they were all kind, and but everybody, wanted to see this because it was such a.
What makes it rare?
Thing.
Because a baby that's 6 months old had it, or because it's not treatable, or both?
Just the occurrence of it is rare. So
it's about 1 in 40,000 children.
In order to have it, so it's a genetic disease. So I'm a carrier. Wes is a carrier. Unbeknownst to us, nobody in our families ever, we didn't know anything about it. Everybody is a carrier for 4 to 8, I think, diseases like that. So like cystic fibrosis is the same like situation, just a more like well-known thing. So anyway, when you get married, you don't know what the other person is a carrier for. And so we were both carriers for SMA. And then it's a 1 in 4 chance that any kid that you have would get the SMA gene from him and from me. And so, yeah.
I know this sounds so, I don't want it to sound stupid or corny, but God laid it on your heart when you were younger to adopt, but you didn't know you had this in you to carry, but you had the heart to want to adopt. And does that make sense? Like I'm trying to say,
Right.
you were going to have children no matter what was inside of you or what you carried.
Right.
So this is going to be a tough question, but I got to ask it because I've never asked it. And I've been with you the day that Graham passed, and I've been with you at the funeral, and I've been with you after you came back to work. But what did that night look like? What did that night look like as a married couple? And this is your first trauma ever outside of you having to deal with your dad being in addiction of some kind. But that's a trauma point. What did that night look like? How did you make a commitment to each other, like a vow? I mean,
I can put myself in that room right now. Like I know what that room looked like. I know what it smelled like. And I've talked to a therapist about this. So, we've worked through some of that stuff, but, I remember distinctly, Pastor Marty came to us that night. He said, you are living right now the worst moment of your life. And that sounds terrible, but it's oddly comforting, because I'm still living, I'm still breathing, and I'm surviving what is going to be the worst possible thing that can happen.
And that's to him too. He's so good with his moments and his timing and his wording.
Right.
Practical.
Exactly.
He's very practical.
And he did say too, I remember him saying everything else after this is going to be easy. Like everything compared to this is going to be easy. And I was like, okay, that's actually comforting also, and that's very true. Like when you compare anything else, you're like, this is not a problem, So.
Was it good to have him there? Was he the first person to come see you? Did family make it there?
Our family lived out of town, so
they started coming in that day, kind of thing. Yeah.
So yeah, that night, I mean, I've always wanted to ask, like, what do you talk about that night? Did you pray? Did you talk to each other?
I don't think we talked about a whole lot, actually.
I don't think we did.
What I remember, so that night that Marty came was the first night, and then the next day is when they kind of ruled everything else out and said this is the very likely diagnosis. And for me, that was the screaming moment. That was literally in a hospital room, I'm, screaming as loud as I can, crying. About how it's not fair, all that. There's an outdoor patio. I had to leave the hospital. And honestly, I don't know what Kelly was doing at that moment. I think her family had arrived by that time. My family was still in Arkansas, so they were a long ways away. But I think that when I did talk to Kelly after that,
we went out to that patio thing.
Right. And that was where...
this patio was at the hospial.
I feel like I'm looking at it right now behind your head, actually. So that's interesting.
That's that is interesting. Because you can definitely see the building we're in now from that patio. You can see kind of the whole...
You can see the patio from here?
I swear I can see it right because that's university. And then that's the children's hospital. And those glass things, that's the patio right there, right?
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
I didn't know that. I'm so sorry.
No, it's okay. I didn't really realize it until we started talking about it. And I was like, I think it's that.
It's a little God nudge too.
Yeah. And so I think that's where, and nothing of my own doing, but I think through the grace and the power of God, I made a vow in that moment to Kelly where I said, what you're going to do is take care of our son for as long as he has left, and give him as much love as you can give him. And I said, my responsibility now is to keep this family together. Because I knew in that moment, I thought I was going to make it through without being emotional. I knew in that moment that I couldn't lose my son and my wife. The only thing worse than losing our son, which was likely going to happen, would be to lose the family that we had started to build together.
Yeah.
And so that's where I had to look at my wedding vows and say, I promise to love you no matter what happens. And this sucks.
Yeah.
This is the worst thing that can happen, but I made a promise and I'm going to keep it.
Yeah. Well, I'm sorry I upset you guys, but I mean,
No.
I feel like that's a powerful moment where couples that listen to this, they may stumble upon it, and it's because now that they go through the exact same thing, but they go through some kind of a trauma moment to where they have to know that the conversation they have and the words that they say in that moment is going to matter for the rest of their life.
Exactly.
And you that's the biggest leadership thing you can say as a husband and a father in that moment, is that I may lose my son, but I'm not going to lose my wife. So, Graham, from that point, how soon did you guys get to take him home, and what did home life look like after that? I guess things changed.
I feel like we were there, I don't know, a few
Maybe
days.
3 days that first time.
We went home. We were in and out of the hospital. He lived for 10 more months after that. In those 10 months, we were in and out. I think it was during those 10 months we were in the hospital, like cumulatively a month of that. And so every time we would, go in and out, we would probably most of the time come home with like some other piece of medical equipment. So we had like a mini ICU that kind of like went with us everywhere. And then it was, just appointments and therapies and all the...
But you found different ways to just bring some normalcy to the situation. I remember coming to a birthday party. Mm-hmm. I remember being at your house. It's like the things you're talking about, like they were there, but they weren't present. They didn't make up, they didn't become part of the conversation, like people would assume, I guess, because as your family and friends, we wanted to make sure that you guys felt normal.
This is a very sad story. And, people get awkward when we say we lost a son or whatever. Mm-hmm. If someone has a trauma like this, don't be awkward about it. It's not comfortable to cry in public. But even if I shed tears about it, I want to talk about Graham. Mm-hmm. And this is something Marty said at his service, that our biggest concern is that people will forget him. We're never going to forget him. Mm-hmm. So we want to talk about him so that we make sure everybody else remembers him. Yeah. And while it feels like this is sadness, in my mind, Graham's legacy is joy. Like you said, we had a Mickey Mouse birthday party because he had to watch Mickey Mouse Clubhouse hours of every day. I've seen the episodes so many times. Mm-hmm. But we said if he's going to have one birthday party, it's going to be a jam up birthday party.
Mm-hmm. And it was. I remember it.
Yeah, it was pretty crazy. Yeah. It was a shindig.
In that, you said Graham lived for 10 months after the diagnosis. Mm-hmm. Was it hard? And like I said, I want to bring life to this conversation as we get toward the end later on, but was it hard to find or keep a relationship with a higher power in any of that season?
I feel like in that time, it was not. It was weirdly enough easier during those times because I think when you're so low, or at least for me, like that's the only thing to help anything. You know what I mean? Like,
I know what you mean. Some people may not though. And so they need to know that there's a higher power in this situation.
Right. Like if it was just up to me, like I wouldn't be able to function. So if you want me to do anything today, then it's going to be through you, know? So I've heard other people say that, I don't know that I totally am with this, but that they, during those low times and then, versus like times where everything's going good, they're like, I kind of miss the relationship I had with the Lord when I was low because it was my only thing. It's harder when things are going good a lot of times to make that the priority, to make that like your reason for living because everything's fine. And, if I didn't have the Lord, what would really change,
That's true.
But when you're down in the valley, it's like, okay, this is it.
Yeah. I've gotten really close to God even when I didn't really know him when I was in jail. It's like, I need you right now,
I'd agree with that I think that was probably the closest my relationship with the Lord has been. Yeah. I didn't find it hard to have faith in that. And I think that is because of the foundation that I had from an early age. And I realized that not everybody is privileged enough to have that foundation. But because I had that and because I had faith that we would see Graham again, according to our beliefs, then that's what what I had to hold on to in that moment. And what I will say is that I think because of the commitment that we made to each other and to God during that diagnosis, we saw amazing things happen in our family. We never saw a medical bill.
Wow.
We were in the hospital for a month, and I don't remember having to pay a medical bill. And we also, one day, a check that I've never seen the size of showed up at our doorstep. I'll never know who it's from. They gave the money to the church, and the church gave the money to us so that they could stay anonymous. Kelly was a private contractor, so if she doesn't work, she doesn't get paid. She didn't have to work one day from Graham's diagnosis until he passed. And then I think a month or so after that.
He passed in August, and I started back working January.
So you needed that time.
Yes,
Right.
especially through the holidays and stuff. I was like, there's no way. And even going back, it was hard, like reentry stuff. But yeah, I definitely needed. And I really feel for people who go through something like that and have to go back to work 2 weeks later or whatever.
Yeah.
I have no idea how.
Yeah.
I would have been
so,
reckless.
I'm not saying that will be everybody's,
Right.
you
Right.
know,
'Cause
experience. It was what we needed, and it was what we were blessed with.
Yeah.
And so we try to have grace and space for other people who are going through that type of.
Yeah. I mean, if people are going through some kind of a trauma, this needs to be, what we call it, rock bottom, I guess. And so some people in addiction, that will be where that diagnosis or the day of loss could be considered rock bottom. That would be, I would say that was my addiction. The day that I decided to get help, that was my rock bottom. And so being able to climb out of that or going to treatment for 30 days. Right. So I got 30 days, but which is great. But not everybody gets that. Some people just get one day or don't get to do it at all.
Yeah.
So you guys, you transformed your living, you transformed your house, all of this, and then it's going to get heavy again. And I do want to just talk about it, not as an interview, but just as conversation. It progressed to where it came to the point where Graham passed away in August. I know that's a hard day, but do you guys mind just telling us about that day and the importance of having each other, and that you never detoured from that, and then the importance of having family and friends, and when it was okay to have them around? Because some people would want just some time. Like, I need you to be away. I need to be me and my husband, or me and my wife and the Lord. But do you mind walking us through that?
I was not able to function, basically. Like I needed people. My friends were there, and my mom and my sisters, and I was sorry.
No, you take your time, all the time you need. I remember being at the hospital, and there's this waiting room outside of the NICU, and there were probably 8, maybe 10 of us there. I remember calling Pastor Marty, and he was on the way because somebody had walked out. I think it was Wes. Wes walked out and told us, and we kind of just all took a deep breath and then all breathed. And it was an honor to be there.
It's odd because the event that led to his death was on a Monday. He went to the hospital, and I feel like Marty and Todd almost met us at the hospital that day. Like
we were joking all the times that we've been to the hospital. Like, Marty has a secret tunnel to the hospital because he beats us there every time. Like how did we're in an ambulance and he's always there first. Yeah. So
we'd been to the hospital so many times, but this one was different. I think we knew that Monday that he had transitioned. But it was until that Tuesday, he was basically, they were doing tests to see if he was brain dead. And I don't like that word. It felt weird even saying it. And I asked Pastor Marty his spiritual view about that, where Graham was when he was still living there and we were keeping him alive. Of course he didn't have an answer. He said he thought that probably what happened was a grace type of situation to where we could say goodbye on our time, and it wasn't just
There he goes with those perfect words again.
And so so essentially we picked the time that he was, would not be with us anymore. We could,
I didn't know that.
yeah. So that Tuesday morning, they told us he was unlikely to recover or to ever live without machines again.
Wow.
And so we had to make the call. And so that's probably when you were in the waiting room, when Pastor Marty was on his way. And I remember, I know not everybody came into the room. There were probably my parents, your parents.
I don't think our parents were.
Did they?
I don't
Was it just
think so.
The doctors?
I think it was like Marty and Todd, maybe.
And they told us, when they turned off the machines, it could take 2 minutes or it could take 2 hours. So when they shut everything down, we sang "It Is Well With My Soul," gathered around the bedside. I think that was actually right before they turned off the machines. And then they put Graham in Kelly's arms, and she has a tattoo. I don't know if she wants to show it or not.
Yeah, you can.
That is where that's where they first put Graham when he was born, in her arms, and that's how he was laying when he passed. So they took out all the tubes and everything, and she held him until he transitioned into
Heaven.
a better life. Yeah, a life where he didn't have this awful disease.
That's heavy, and I can't thank you guys enough for just sharing that part of it. And it's a part of your story that.
And it's again one of those moments in trauma that I will be able, I can put myself in that moment. Like I can be in my mind, I can be in that moment. That may not be healthy for me. It is sometimes soothing, as weird as that sounds, to be able to go back and say, this is something I experienced. It shapes who I am. And I need to be able to hold on to that. To let my story impact anybody else's life that it possibly can.
No, I mean, you're absolutely right. As parents, we always, we're like, I don't know how they do that. I don't know how you did that.
You don't know that you can do it until you have to do
like
it.
do it.
That's what I was going to say. Like you just, I mean, you don't really have a choice, I guess, kind of thing.
And you're like, I would much rather be non-inspirational and have my son here than to be able to inspire people.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? But you don't know what you can go through and what you can survive until you have to do it.
Right.
And I think that that's why it's so important to know what's inside of you and know the commitments you have made to other people, to yourself, to God. Because there may come a point in your life where that's all you have to hold on to, and you've got to hold on to that to have some kind of foundation for when everything else has changed.
Thanks for watching and listening to the Recovery Vow Podcast. Be sure to like and subscribe and follow along on all of our social media platforms. A huge shout out to all of our sponsors. You can find a list of them in the show notes below or on the screen you're watching on our YouTube channel. We'll see you next week. Today's episode is brought to you by Candace Riddle Realty, Goldman, Norval Fixture and Equipment, S&S Supplies, Belinda Thompson, Rhett Walker, Carpet Cleaning Pros of Augusta, Coleman Construction, Bagwell Insurance, Tree Guys with Ties, Barrow Walden, Kendrick Paint and Body, Roof Savers, Game Changer, City of Refuge, Augusta Magazine, Burrow Elijah Attorney at Law, Communigraphics, The Nonprofit Desk, Corbin Jones State Farm, Paradise Turf, Sally Kohler Photography, Atlas Health and Wellness, Dr. Rhonda Milner, Kendra Neal Studio, Augusta Dream Center. And a special thank you to all of our other supporters of the Recovery Vow Podcast.